They talk about percentages, about numbers, but they don't talk about this sound, the silence. My grandfather, he heard the saws running here. My father did too. I heard them for 40 years of my life. That sound, it wasn't just noise. It was the heartbeat of this town. Now, it's stopped. They're told in calloused hands. They're told in for sale signs on front lawns. And they're told in the deafening silence of a mill that was once the heart of it all. This is not a story about economics. It's not a story about international trade. This is a story about a broken promise. And it's about a town, and hundreds like it, being slowly erased, left behind by the very country they helped to build. For the next few minutes, we're not going to look at charts or stock market tickers. We're going to look at faces. We're going to listen to stories. We're going to understand the true cost of decisions made thousands of miles away in halls of power by people who have never set foot here, never breathed the scent of sawdust in the morning air, and never had to look their child in the eye and tell them they have to leave home. This is the human cost of a trade war. The legacy, the heartbeat of a town, more than 75 years ago. It didn't start in a boardroom with a PowerPoint presentation. It started with an old truck, a handshake, and two brothers, Ross and John Gorman. Their dream wasn't just to build a business, it was to build a community. That dream became Gorman Brothers Lumber, and for 3/4 of a century it was more than just a mill. It was a covenant. The Gorman Mill survived. It survived the brutal winters of the Okanagan. It survived recessions that brought other companies to their knees. It survived technological revolutions that made lesser mills obsolete. It survived because it was more than a place to cut wood. It was the town's anchor. The mill whistle was the town's alarm clock in the morning, and its signal to go home at night. It was everything. My husband, Frank, he worked there for 45 years. Started as a young man, pulling green chain. Retired as a foreman. That mill, it put our 3 children through school. It built this very house we're sitting in. Every Friday, that paycheck fed every family and paid every bill at every store on Main Street. You knew your neighbors because you worked with them. You went to church with them. Your kids played hockey with their kids. If someone's house burned down, a hat was passed around the mill floor on Monday morning. By Tuesday, that family had what they needed to get back on their feet. That's the kind of place this was. It wasn't just a company, it was a community. It was a birthright, a legacy passed from one generation to the next. Grandfather, father, and son. It was hard work, honest work, the kind of work that leaves sawdust in your hair and a deep satisfaction in your heart at the end of the day. It was the kind of job that allowed you to own a home, raise your kids without fear, and look forward to a retirement earned with dignity. It was a promise that if you gave your loyalty and your strength, you would be taken care of, that your town would be taken care of, that your children would have a future here in the place you called home. This wasn't just a mill. It was the collected heritage of 1,000 families, a heritage built on sweat, loyalty, and a simple, unspoken belief. If you work hard and play by the rules, you have a place in this world, a place that can't be taken from you. Or so they thought. The Betrayal, a tale of two Canadas, a world of policy papers, of strategic priorities, and of closed-door meetings. A world where communities are line items on a spreadsheet. A world where the heartbeat of a town is easily ignored. While the families of West Kelowna were planning their futures around the steady hum of the mill, the decision-makers in Ottawa were focused on a different crisis. Aluminum. The words echoed through the halls of Parliament and dominated the national news. And with every mention, the lumber towns of British Columbia faded further into the background. It's a phenomenon you could call crisis priority. The loudest fire gets the most water. And the polished, powerful lobbies of the central Canadian manufacturing belt were much louder and much closer to the ears of power than the distant voices from the forests of the West. This is the tale of two Canadas. In Ottawa, it was about policy. In West Kelowna, it was about survival. In Ottawa, it was about geopolitical chess. In West Kelowna, it was about putting food on the table. The warnings were sent. The alarms were sounded. Mayors, CEOs, union leaders. They made the long trip to the capital. They sat in sterile boardrooms and tried to explain that this wasn't just another trade issue. They tried to explain that you can't just rewire a 75-year-old supply chain overnight. They tried to make them understand that these weren't just jobs, but the very soul of their communities. They pleaded for their voices to be heard, but their cries were a whisper in a storm of competing interests. The sound of the saws in British Columbia was too far away, too faint to be heard over the political noise of the capital. The people of West Kelowna weren't just fighting tariffs from another country, they were fighting the indifference of their own, and that is a battle you can't win. The human cost, the empty spaces, it creates a vacuum, and that vacuum pulls the life out of everything around it. It's a slow, creeping death that starts on Main Street. Diner owner. It happened so fast. The lunch rush, it just evaporated. For 30 years, from noon to 1:30, this place was packed. You couldn't get a seat. The noise, the laughter, the guys coming in, covered in sawdust, ordering the daily special. Then, after the last shutdown, silence. I held on for 6 months, dipping into my savings, hoping. But you can't run a business on hope. I had to let my staff go. That was the hardest day of my life, telling people I'd known for decades that they didn't have a job anymore. It wasn't just a diner. It was the town's living room. Now it's just an empty room. The promise of a home, of building equity, of having a piece of the Canadian dream, becomes a trap. Houses that were once a family's greatest asset become an anchor, dragging them down. Our parents are here. Our kids were born here. This is home. But the bank doesn't care about that. My husband's been laid off for 8 months. There's nothing here. We can't sell the house. Nobody's buying. We're just walking away, letting the bank take it. What else can we do? Stay and starve? Or leave and have a chance? It's not a choice, is it? It's the loss of the future. It's the hollowing out of a generation. In a mill town, there was a path. You graduated high school on Friday, and on Monday morning, you could be starting a job at the mill that would last you a lifetime. It was a tough path, but it was a clear one. Now that path is gone. That's the plan. Everyone's plan. Go to Calgary, go to Vancouver, anywhere but here. There's nothing for us here anymore. My dad worked at the mill. His dad worked at the mill. I guess I'm the generation that breaks the chain. It's whatever. The fracturing of families. The exodus of youth. A town without young people is a town without a future. And then there are the invisible scars. The wounds that don't show up on an employment report. The rise in depression, the strain on marriages, the loss of dignity. For a person who has spent their entire life working with their hands, providing for their family, the silence of the mill isn't just an economic reality. It's a judgment. It's a statement that your skills are no longer needed, that your life's work has no more value, that the promise made to you and to your father before you was conditional, and the conditions have changed. Conclusion and resonance point. It's written on the faces of the people left behind. It's found in the silence of a factory that once echoed with the sounds of industry, and it's found in the broken promise between a nation and the people who built it. Policies are made in buildings of glass and steel, but their consequences are felt in homes made of wood. This was never an attack on any single political party. It's a reminder, a painful, heartbreaking reminder that decisions have consequences. And those consequences are borne most heavily by those with the quietest voices. The story of West Kelowna is a tragedy, but it is not unique. It is a warning. All across this country, in farming communities watching their livelihoods regulated out of existence, in oil towns facing an uncertain future, similar promises are being tested. Similar heartbeats are beginning to slow. In our next story, we will travel to the prairies to hear from the farmers who feel they are next. Make sure you're subscribed so their voices can be heard. But as the light fades on this town, one question remains, a question that goes far beyond economics or politics. When the dust settles and the experts have moved on to the next crisis, who is left to fight for the families and towns that were the backbone of this country? Share your thoughts on this in the comments.